There's West and there's Passover. Passover because we know everything is God. And sometimes the background's a little blurry, but if you look closely, you see things in the background. Right now in this background, I've got someone hiding. Stop, see if you can find. And let me know in the comments. We look closely at all the blurriness in our world and look for God. All right, so this class, I wanted to focus on Passover inspiration that will be applicable for the Noahide. There's a rapper called Kanye West who spoke out against the Jews and then just came out for the Jews. His comments spark a lot of anti-Semitism. And here you have a social influencer whose comments are creating a lot of ripple effects, a lot of anti-Semitism. What is our response? Our response is Passover. Passover means we don't get stuck. We don't put value on statements that inspire anti-Semitism. We don't fear statements that rile up anti-Semitism. Passover means we pass over. We pass over the stuff of this world, knowing God is our protection, God is our protector. That's Passover. And that's our response to Kanye West and anything in that ballpark. Those are my thoughts. What are yours on this topic that is very trending? Okay, Danielle has a heart. That means she agrees.
I had not heard any of this.
Good.
So I think it's great. I love your perspective on it. And actually, now that I say that, I think my husband had told me about the first time, the anti stuff, but I hadn't heard or known a lot of detail about that. And then
that's great.
The update.
And me neither.
The update you just gave, I hadn't heard that. But anyway,
all part of the same stuff.
I love it.
Well, I did not hear. Is there a recent one that he
yeah, very recent. I don't know.
Like okay,
Friday. Something really recent.
Oh wow. Yeah.
I don't know.
I haven't heard, but regardless, that's not, it's not good. Yeah, I actually I'm surprised that some people have this they're celebrity and they think they kind of allowed to say things that without knowing the repercussions of their words. So it's kind of sad and disappointing. Yeah.
Well, in other words, what you're saying is maybe many people say similar statements, but when a celebrity says it, a lot of people pay attention and maybe people value it. And maybe people think, oh, if a media influencer, if a celebrity is saying something, there must be truth to it. And that's maybe why those statements carry a lot of weight. But we say we fear God and nothing else. Nothing else has relevance. It's all literally irrelevant. And therefore, literally, as Danielle said, who even knows about these things? Who even pays attention? Who even cares?
Well, of course, it's unacceptable what he's saying. But at the same time, he has a mental illness, So I'm not saying it's an excuse, but what a terrible thing to say that. And I hope that he gets help and people, not following what he's saying, not following what he's saying it's bad. It's just bad.
That's a beautiful response.
For sure.
Yes, he definitely claims it. So he himself is saying, I have a mental illness. So Natanya is definitely allowed to say it. Natanya said a beautiful thing. Everyone with mental illnesses should get help. Passover is a time of healing for the world. Everyone should be healed. And as the world is healed, obviously, what we see as negativity is just less and less and less, because when there's no illness, when there's no reason for these irrational statements, they disappear. And the people who are grabbing onto them, maybe they'll also be healed and disappear. And this is Passover. Passover is about freedom. Passover is about healing. Passover is an energy that's relevant to all of us. And that's why I really wanted to focus on some relevant freedom concepts that we can glean from Passover and apply to our life anytime, and especially this time of year. It's good ideas to think about for ourselves, for what we want and we need to try to achieve over these weeks. And I think everyone's response was so beautiful and so appropriate. Yes, we don't pay attention. Yes, we pray that everyone gets the healing they need. Yes, we know that God runs the world and the only force that's real is him. And Passover reminds us of that one more time. Thinking about Passover and the Noahide, and I was thinking, so what from Passover is relevant that we should share? So I wanted to bring out some concepts with Passover with the idea, again, not that a Noahide has any obligation to make a Passover ritualized Seder, as it is referred to, but rather some of the ideas we could extrapolate from the Seder concept that I thought could be relevant in our life, and we don't have to wait till next week, Wednesday night, which is the night of the Seder. But already during this whole time, during this whole month, it's a time of freedom. It's a time of new, fresh starts, which goes back to Natalia's statement of healing. We should all have the healing, the Passover healing, the Passover freedom, passing over any negativity. We should be able to apply it in our lives. So we're thinking about Passover. The most critical item for Passover is matzah. And I thought matzah really is a relevant concept for all of us to understand. Matzah is a food of faith. We say when we eat the matzah, we're literally digesting faith. And it represents faith because 3 million people went into a desert just with some matzah, which means they had absolute trust that God would provide. And he did. God fed them for 40 years, the manna, which we're told is the food of the angels. We're told it's going to be the dessert by the Messianic feast. But we didn't know that. We didn't know it was God's plans. We just know we were going out with our matzah and our faith and our trust that God would provide. So that's one strong expression of faith. We don't know what's going to be, but we trust God will take care. It also represents faith because it's so simple. It's just flour and water, nothing else. Sort of like our connection to God. Simple, selfless bond, no benefits, no reasons, no conditions. Just like when you're making matzah, you don't add yeast, you don't add sweeteners, you don't add oil, you don't add egg, no apple juice, just flour and water. Just belief. In the Seder, there's questions of the 4 sons, the wise, the wicked, the simple, the one who doesn't even know how to ask. And the wise son is usually understood as the righteous, as very often he is the embodiment of the righteous son. But sometimes we really understand him simply as not righteous, but wise, intellectual. And what is he told? He asks questions. He has some intellectual questions. And we're told our response to him is, don't eat anything after the final matzah. We want you to walk away from the Seder with a taste of matzah in your mouth. Put aside your intellect. Leave in your mouth the taste of faith, of matzah. So we're thinking of Passover and thinking of the energy of Passover. The energy of Passover is faith, simple faith, faith that isn't going to intellectualize something, isn't going to give reasons and explanations. We trust in God, and that's it. And that's enough. And that's why I'm saying when things happen in the world that someone could perceive as scary, frightening, intimidating, the world's going in a very bad direction, we go back to Passover. We go back to matzah. You know what? We trust you, God, and that's enough for us. Another reason that I thought was applicable, why matzah so critical in faith, also obviously here's the key to freedom, because Passover is about attaining freedom, what we all are striving for. And it's the key to freedom because matzah is flat. As we said, it's in a sense tasteless. It's flour and water. It's humility. No manipulation by subjective emotions. It just expresses flat, absolute nullification. And that absolute nullification is the key to freedom. So that's an idea that we can all really digest inside ourselves. Faith where reason does not operate. Humility as the key to faith, as the key to freedom. That symbol of the matzah is relevant to all of us. Now, at that Seder, that very ritualized Passover service that will be next Wednesday and Thursday night, we have what's called a Seder plate. And on the Seder plate, Seder means order, because everything here has a very specific order. Very, very, very designated, as I said, ritualized order. We have 3 matzahs on some type of plate, covered by some type of cloth, over which are 6 items. And each of the items also have a message to us about how we attain freedom. And then once that Passover plate is organized, we begin our Seder. Seder again means order, because now we have an order of 15 steps that we are going to go through, and they're all designed to attain freedom. We're not going to go through all 15 steps. I know we won't have time for that. I want to go through the items on the Seder plate and see what we can extract from them that's relevant. And then I want to go through a few of the steps of the Seder to see what we can gain from that. And again, you don't have to wait for next Wednesday night or Thursday night to start doing the work of Passover. You can do it right now. So what's on the Seder plate? So as I said, we have 6 items. We have a piece of roasted chicken to commemorate the Paschal lamb. It's the shank bone or the neck. We don't eat it, but it's on that Seder plate to commemorate what we had. And that's a very powerful lesson. That's a lesson that we all could think about, because it's talking about, again, everything here is designed to attain freedom. So one of the elements of attaining freedom is thinking about roots, thinking about who we are, where we belong. And that gives us the determination to free ourselves. And for the Noahide, who am I and where I belong could be, I'm a self-made man. Maybe I'm not a continuation of the generations past. Obviously, at some point, every Noahide has some relationship to Sarah, who from her milk that gave the nations of the world this energy of the Noahide. So you stretch back to very illustrious lineage there. But each one of you, what you made, what you became, that's who you are. Where you've chosen to be, that's where you belong. And we need to focus on those roots, and of course, give those roots over to our children to give the focus of, I can free myself, I can move forward. What else is on the Seder plate? Well, there's a hard-boiled egg. Egg is soft, but we boil it so it's hard. And that represents another offering that was eaten with the Paschal lamb, an offering for the holiday. Why? Well, the egg represents the cycle of life. It's actually the first food we give a mourner is egg. It's round. Things turn. Passover is a very happy, joyous holiday, but we're in exile. There's a destruction. We don't have our temple. We're not united in Israel, but it's round. It's a cycle. Things are going to turn. The redemption's coming. And for that energy, we look at the egg, because again, the egg is soft, but we boiled it. It became hard, became sort of tough. And we're told that's also something we need for freedom. We have to have a certain inner strength, and a lot of us want to maybe be soft and be accepted by everyone and, not have to make waves, but you can't be Noahide and not make waves. I don't think that's possible. We need a toughness for our freedom. We can't conform with the status quo. No Noahide could conform with the status quo. If we want freedom, we have to take a tough stance for truth. That's the egg. It's soft, but it became hard through the waters. You might have started off soft, but you became hard to stand up for truth. Twice on the Seder plate, we have the bitter herbs, which is a combination of two things. A certain type of lettuce, romaine lettuce, and horseradish. And they're there to remind us of the harshness we've endured, the harshness of the slavery the Jews went through in Egypt. But again, this isn't all past. This is all very current. So this is supposed to be giving us a message, again, a message about freedom. And the lettuce has a very interesting message, because the romaine lettuce, the leaves taste good. Why is it on the Seder plate twice? Because the stalk is bitter. The stalk is bitter, the leaves are sweet. The leaves represent freedom, the stalk, slavery. Very powerful message that's relevant for all of us. How do we get to those sweet leaves? Through that bitter stalk. True freedom is attained by overcoming the challenges. I shouldn't have to say that. We don't want to say that. We want to say, no, we're going the smooth, easy road. But of course, none of us would say that, because that's not true of any of our lives, right? It's a message we're reminding ourselves of by the Passover Seder. We want freedom. There's the harsh stuff, but it's part of the process to get to the sweet. We're going through the exile to get to the redemption. We did that in Egypt, and we're doing it now. Right now, we're going through exile, and we are going to attain right now, very imminently, ultimately soon, redemption. Go through the hard stuff. It's going to be very sweet. What else do we have on the Seder plate? We have charoses. Charoses is supposed to represent the mortar that was used to make the bricks and the clay. It's from grinding up finely apples, pears, nuts, a drop of wine. The consistency, the color is like mortar, but it's sweet, which again is expressing a similar theme of the bitter herbs, that when there's a great challenge, there's something very sweet that comes from it. The greater the challenge, the sweeter is the freedom that comes from it. So when we're looking now, today, we're in the month of Passover. The month in Hebrew is called Nisan, which really actually represents miracles. We're looking for our freedom, and we can think back to things we have gone or are going through that are challenging, like the mortar, like the bricks. And it's sweet. What comes from it is sweet. It doesn't start off sweet. It doesn't feel sweet, but we trust God. We know God is with us every step. We know the point is for the sweetness. God isn't abandoning us. God isn't spaced out. We're not too small for his attention. He's focused on every detail of each one of our lives. And he knows sometimes we're going through things that feels like mortar and bricks. And he knows it's for the sweetness. We also have on the Seder plate a vegetable, onion, a cooked potato, parsley, that we dip in salt water evoking the tears we've shed through all these times, harsh times. Again, symbolizing there was a lot of tears. There's a lot of reasons for tears. A lot of, in Egypt, back-breaking labor over the generations, many different reasons for those tears. But again, God gave us the tears as a prerequisite to the freedom, giving us, as we're saying for about the matzah, the humility that we need to be his people. And we have that choice today. We all have that choice. We can choose to be humbled by the rat race of life. We could choose to be humbled by all the blows life gives us. Or we could create our own humility, like the matzah, flat. We said the matzah, the flatness of the matzah, the humility, the nullification, the tastelessness is that road to real freedom. Because when we choose not to let life bash us and humble us, but to really create an inner humility, we don't have to go down that road of materialistic futility. We can create our own humility. That's the road to freedom. That is very briefly the Seder plate. And then we have 15 steps. 15 steps of the Seder. We are not going through 15 steps. We are not modeling the Seder here, but I want to pull out some of the steps that I felt could be relevant, and we could learn the lesson. We could glean what those steps are telling us. So we're going to jump. I think we're going to do maybe about 5 of them. And I picked 5 that I felt were all things that we can think about in our own life. So I'm going to jump to step 5. There were 4 before that I'm skipping. Because again, we're not recreating the Seder here, but we're looking at the concept of the Seder and saying, how does it apply to me today as a Noahide? How can I move toward my own personal freedom? And we all can. And of course, you can walk toward freedom, and hopefully you do walk toward freedom every day of your life. And we all should be walking toward our freedom every day of our life. But in this time, it's like when the winds of freedom are blowing. The spring winds, the winds of freedom are blowing. It's in the air. So when we now do the work, it's a more powerful work. So the 5th step of the 15 steps of the Seder is telling the story. Telling the story of what happened in Egypt. That's the longest step. And we're told you can make it as long as you want. And the more you make it, the better it is. Some people, of course, do it very fast. And some people do it very long. But again, remembering Egypt as a parallel for what we're going through currently in our lives. We're living it. We're examining our lives through the guise of ancient Egypt. We speak about Pharaoh. We speak about Moses. Who's Pharaoh? Pharaoh today is my ego, is what enslaves me. It's what blocks me from God. Moses is my inner voice, my relationship to God that sets me free. And of course, today, a person could say, I'm free. I live in America or Canada. I'm free. But that's a Pharaoh version of freedom. That's not real freedom. The Moses version of freedom, the soul voice version of freedom is, I'm free when my soul is free. If my soul's not free, I'm probably enslaved to Pharaoh, even while I delude myself and think I am my master. So we have many, many people in this world that think they're the masters of their own destiny, but they're really enslaved. Like going back to what Netanya said, very, very relevant. Here we were talking about, someone making very anti-Semitic comments that really created a tremendous ripple effect in social media of America. And Netanya said very appropriately, he's not well. He needs healing. So a person like that would say, I'm free. I'm the master. I have a powerful voice. People listen to me. I've got a lot of money. I've got a lot of power. You're not. You're a slave to your own mental illness. You're free. You're not free at all. And of course, that's a pretty overt example, but it's true for so many of us. There's such illusion of freedom. Freedom is when your soul is free. That was the 5th step. 7th step. Now we're about to eat the matzah. And before we eat the matzah, there's 2 blessings. 7th step is the blessing we make always on bread, because matzah is, of course, a form of bread. And the 8th step is a special blessing we make on the matzah. But this whole idea of making the blessing on the bread, I thought was very powerful, because the whole idea of the bread, we say, is the blessing we make on the bread, is that we say that God brings forth bread from the earth. What happens in the earth? Seeds are put in the ground and they decompose and they rot. They lose their original form and then they begin to sprout and grow. And that growth of the seed parallels our growth. So, the slave says, I'm stuck under the ground. My life is rotten. And the free person says, my challenges in life help me discover the strength of my soul. We all go through these being stuck under the ground and rotting experiences, these decomposing experiences. So who here relates to that and says, yes, I am a strong, free woman. I've discovered much strength in all of my decomposing experiences. You relate to that? You've seen the strength you've reached through those decomposing experiences. They usually don't feel good. But hopefully, like the seed, afterwards you look back and you're like, oh, I get it. I wouldn't have chosen it. I still wouldn't choose it for the future. But for the past, I get it. There's a saying from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. Previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was imprisoned very harshly under the communists. We're going to 1927 here. And here's the leader of world Jewry going through a horrific, spiritually horrific experience, let alone physically horrific experience. And he said afterwards about the experience, he said, if before he went through it, he could have paid all the money in the world to avoid even a few minutes of that, he would have. And he did not have money, and he meant it. But afterwards, after the experience is over, if someone wanted to buy off of him some minutes of those experiences for all the money in the world, he wouldn't sell it. Not for all the money in the world. And that's, I think, a real expression of what we feel when we're going through and after these decomposing experiences. These experiences that sort of really take away a lot of what we viewed as ourselves, really break us down, but breaking us down for us to have a growth we could not have had before. We were stuck, maybe stuck in a good place, but we were still stuck. And when we get broken down, now the new growth comes. So I relate to this a lot. Danielle relates to this.
Question whenever you have a chance. It's related to Pesach, so I do have a question. And
what's the question, Ruth?
Well, I don't know what to say to a friend of mine that she for Pesach on Thursday she have a doctor's appointment, and I'm like, but are you celebrating Pesach? So how can you celebrate Pesach if you have other plans? And she said so she thinks it's okay. I said no, we supposed not do anything for ourselves that day. That's for we have an appointment, an annual appointment.
Is she a Noahide or is she a Jew?
She's a Noahide.
So a Noahide does not have an obligation to the holidays, meaning the holidays that I would view most obligatory on the Noahide, where I feel, as you're saying, that they should put everything on the side and focus on the holiday, is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Those 3 days I would suggest to the Noahide to, like you're saying, No doctor's appointments, nothing extraneous.
Right.
And ideally take off work that day if you can. Some people can, some people can't. But if you can, I would highly advise taking off work and focusing on repentance, the upcoming year, pray, Psalms. Noahides can give charity that day. I would definitely advise to do so. Your relationship to God and creating a year, because just all mankind, all Jews and all Noahides, the whole world is being judged and their year is being written. Besides those 3 days of those three days of the holiday, I wouldn't say any other holiday is obligatory on the Noahide. It's not. It's more a choice of understanding the energy of the holiday and then finding a way to incorporate that into your life. So if your friend, if you shared with her the thoughts of this class, or sent her a link to the class, and she's working on herself to really create her freedom over this time, if she does or doesn't go to the doctor that day is totally fine, because God's not asking her to stop her life and only focus on Passover, but definitely it's an opportunity. You have the opportunity to tune into freedom. You don't have to. You really don't have to, but you have the opportunity. And since the opportunity is given, take advantage.
Yeah, she claims that we're following Torah. So but I get, yes, okay. I thank you for the insight.
I wouldn't say I would say if she needs to go to the doctor, then she can, but she should definitely create time from Wednesday night on for the next
at least we should acknowledge, the day.
To acknowledge, to focus, and to do the spiritual work of freedom. But again, she could start today. She doesn't have to wait till next Wednesday night, because this whole month has a special energy of freedom. But on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, those 3 days, I would advise a Noahide to, if possible, take off work and definitely don't do anything extra.
We do
focus on God.
Yeah, no, we do. And she always did in Pesach, but I don't know what happened this year. So that was my question. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm so glad you have other Noahides in your life that you can network with, and that's beautiful, because for a lot of Noahides, it's a bit of a lonely existence. So that's a blessing.
Thank you.
Sure. So that was step 7. 7 is the blessing before the bread. Step 8 is the blessing before the matzah. And then we get to step 9, which is eating the bitter herbs, as we said, the lettuce with the bitter stem, the sweeter leaves, and the horseradish, which could be quite bitter and sharp. And that's, again, as we're saying, the bitterness, the setbacks, the pains that are the catalyst for growth. And yet we take all that bitterness and we dip it in that very sweet, what we call charoses, this ground up fruits and nuts with a little wine, as we said, representing the mortar. So that's bitter, but it's sweet, to sort of create that sense of the purpose of the bitter is the sweet. The purpose of the bitter is to reach greater good, greater freedom. But to do that, I have to go through the bitter and I have to change. Change is hard. A slave mentality says, I can't change. This is what I'm used to. This is what I am. A lot of us are slaves, even if we're slaves to good things, like we have good habits generally, but the slave mentality means we're stuck. Even if we're stuck in good, but we're not progressing forward. The goal from this Passover, the goal of utilizing the energy of this time, is to tell myself I don't belong to my habits. I can move, I can change, and I am changing. I'm a work in progress, and that's great. It doesn't always feel good. Like I said, the maror is bitter, but then we have that tiny drop of haroses, a very tiny drop, not at all to remove the taste of the bitter. It tastes bitter, maror, and that tiny drop of haroses does not take away the bitter taste, but it's reminding me. It's just reminding me, as I really taste the bitter, it's reminding me the goal is the sweet, the good, the fruit. What sometimes helps me when I'm going through the hard stuff, sometimes I just have some mantra that I have created before, or create at that moment. I just keep saying it. It's sort of like my lifeline. I keep saying some mantra that expresses this type of belief. And I just keep like saying it, even if at the moment I'm saying it a little flat. I'm saying it, it's a little hard to really feel it. I don't really feel it, but I keep saying it and saying it and saying it in my mind and on my lips. And then eventually it evokes the truth of it. Because of course it's true. And of course I believe in it. So sometimes just saying it enough, it comes out. Our mind and our heart are not in the same place, but eventually our heart gets in sync back with our mind. And sometimes most powerfully is even in this harsh situation, reminding myself of the good that I still can see in the challenge. Because even in every challenge, we can still see, well, you know, God is being very kind with this detail or that aspect. It doesn't take away the harshness of what I'm going through, but it mitigates it, and it reminds me that God's compassionate hand is involved. So when I see God's compassion within the challenge, it helps me stay focused that this challenge in general is God's compassion. And sometimes, you know, it's hard to see it. Sometimes we don't understand it. It doesn't take away that it is God's compassion. And that's what it is. And in general, of course, in all the things we go through that seem ununderstandable, that we're like, what? What's he thinking? He loves me, I know. So what's he thinking? We don't always know what he's thinking, but we always know it's him. And we always know it's coming from him. And we always know it's coming from love. And the more we stay focused on those basic ideas, the stronger and stronger our muscles become in handling all the stuff that doesn't seem to make any sense to us. So that's the 9th step. The 11th step 11 is when we get to the meal. We go through 10 steps before the meal. Why do we have a meal here at all when everything is so ritualized and spiritual? Because the meal is expressing the point. After everything, all these spiritual steps, we take all this physical, the meal, the food, and use it to serve God. And that's the point. Ultimately, God is not wanting us to be angels in heaven. He has those. He's not wanting us to stay all day in synagogue. That's not at all his point. He wants us to live in this physical world and use it to serve him. And that's what the meal represents. We are using the physical. We're having a very physical meal, and it's part of our Seder. It's part of serving God. And of course, when you're eating the meal, you could be a slave or you could be free. And the slave is the person who's a slave to food. There's a lot of people in this world that are a slave to food. You know, the I live to eat phenomena. The food free person, the one who is free as he's eating, I don't live to eat, I eat to live. I'm not a slave to food. I'm a food liberator. And for all of us, that could be quite challenging. Food could really be a challenge and express a lot in our relationship. And it's really something to think about. With food, literally with food. Are we slaves or are we free? I think food and money are those two areas where it really comes out in a very, very base way. Am I a slave or am I free? And when we're eating, to really think that, God, please help that this eating should help me be free. If I'm not enslaved to food, it's the most amazing, godly thing to eat. It's such a strong expression of the general purpose of my existence, making physical spiritual. How do I make physical spiritual? By doing it for you. Again, food, money, these very, very physical things that are totally embedded in our world, they're vehicles for the greatest spirituality. And we spoke about Purim, and we mentioned or did not mention that we're told, in a sense, it's the holiest day of the year. And we think, no, we think Yom Kippur is the holiest day. Well, Yom Kippur, you're in synagogue all day and we don't eat. Or the Noahide can eat, but perhaps restricts themselves from eating to a certain degree to become disencumbered from the physical, to be able to be really spiritual and lofty. And that's great and that's wonderful for Yom Kippur. But that's not how God wants us to live every day. And that's why we say Purim is even higher, because Purim, we're eating and we're drinking and we're feasting, and it's all about God. We're supposed to enjoy his beautiful world, but at the same time, we're supposed to be free, which means we're not under the food. We're not enslaved to the food. Like I said, we're not living to eat. We're liberating the food. We're eating to live. We're utilizing the food to help us have this relationship with God, so that every time we eat, we're freeing the food to become part of our divine service, to show there's a godly spark in that food, which is now part of our way of relating to God. So we're totally allowed to enjoy food. God gave it to us. We're totally allowed to enjoy the physical of this world. Again, like Ruth was comparing before, this is not Catholicism. This is not Christianity. There's no ultimate, vision of being cut off from the physical world. It's using the physical world to serve God.
Robinson, if I may add, I'm practicing, saying braca after meal, like you have suggested before. And I think it helps. It really helps, to be, elevate the food and, through these blessings. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was going to be the final point I was going to touch on. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's the next step in the Seder. Netanya is so right. As we bless before and bless after the food, we're just very consciously reminding ourselves this is all about God. And there's no part of our life that's not about God. And there's no part of our life that's devoid of God. And again, going back to our starting point about comments that could bring fear or seeing people's response to them. No, not if you're free, only if you're enslaved. If you're free, everything in this physical world is part of God's reality. And there's no force but God. And then we're all very, very safe. So yes, I was going to actually end the final step I wanted to touch on, and of course we're just touching on these things, is step 13. We went from 11 to 13. And 13 is the grace after the meal. So we have the meal, and then we have the grace after the meal, where we thank God for the food. And this theme of thanking God after we eat is confidence. Confidence, there's a higher force within our daily life. We're supposed to, when we say that blessing after the food, and this applies always, not just Passover, we're supposed to say it out loud. We're supposed to say it with joy. We're supposed to say it with sincerity. And we know it's initiating a reciprocal current. Miracles happen when the divine energy from beyond enters within. Why did all those miracles happen in Egypt? Because the Jews believed they would. And those who didn't believe saw plagues. To see the miracles, you open your heart and your mind open enough to receive the infinite. And that's the opening we make when we thank God for the miracle of our food. So definitely, as Netanya is saying, this idea of being free and making it so practical, right? Because sometimes these ideas are these big, beautiful, broad statements. We don't really know what we're talking about. Now, sometimes we do. We can say, oh, yes, I want to be free of this fear. I want to be free of this inhibition. I want to be free of this hang-up. And we can relate to it very practically. But sometimes we can't. And I'm saying food, money. Those are two wonderful things to work on freedom from. Again, freedom from doesn't mean you don't eat and you don't have money to live, but it means not being enslaved to them. And that's the delicate balance of God's perspective. It's not like I gave you a beautiful world for you not to use. And it's not like be a slave to the world. It's like be free. Don't be enslaved to food. Be a food liberator. Don't be enslaved to money. Be a money liberator. Use it as another expression of your relationship with God. So when you bless before and after the food, it's definitely a reminder. It's not a triptych, meaning you can bless before, bless after, and be totally enslaved in the middle. It doesn't give you a free pass, but it's reminding you. It's putting guideposts, it's putting boundaries. It's reminding you, this is all about God. Eating is about God. Earning money and spending money and saving money and using money and sharing money. It's all about God. So my goal isn't to not have money and not have food. My goal isn't to be enslaved to money and enslaved to food. My goal is to liberate them by using them to serve God. And I think for each one of us, as we continue on our journey and as we attain more and more freedom, that stuff, fears, this world, media influencers, responses in the world, they don't enslave us, they don't fear us, they're not things we're under. They're all things we look at through this prism, through this paradigm of Passover. It's all about Passover, going beyond, going above, and knowing everything in the world is something I'm using, I've been given as a gift, the sweet or the not sweet, a gift to serve God.